For our social documentary, we had Tell Them You Love Me by Maddie Dowd, Micah Galoza, Haley Labs, and Nefi Ross Rubin. Today, we will be explaining what we believe the message of the documentary is, our main takeaways, what social psychology strategies were being used, and the impact of this case on society and our social environments.
The main message of Tell Them You Love Me focuses on the issues of consent, communication, and power, especially when working with someone with severe disabilities. Professor Anna Stubblefield used phallic communication when working with Derek Johnson, a man with cerebral palsy. During this practice, she believed Derek was expressing his thoughts and feelings through this method. However, this was not true. Many experts questioned whether the messages were truly Derek's words or if they were being influenced by the facilitator. This also shows how personal beliefs and emotions can influence how people interpret situations differently. The case raised ethical concerns about professional boundaries when working with vulnerable populations. The film also makes viewers think about the risks of speaking for someone who doesn't know what they're saying completely or at all. This is why protecting vulnerable individuals while also respecting their independence and dignity is very important. One of the biggest takeaways from this documentary is how important it is to make sure that communication methods used for people with disabilities are accurate and trustworthy. It highlights how controversial facilitated communication can be and how it can lead to serious misunderstandings if proven to not be reliable. Another takeaway is a question of whether good intentions can still be harmful when boundaries and ethics are crossed. Anna was a professor, and because of that role, many people believed that she had the responsibility to maintain clear and ethical boundaries. The documentary highlights how personal beliefs can influence how we interpret situations. As I mentioned earlier, Anna strongly believed that her and Derek were communicating and that their relationship was real. However, there are many doubts from experts and Derek's family from the outside looking in. It encourages viewers to think critically and alter mindsets and how society protects and represents people with disabilities. It also emphasizes the importance of protecting the dignity of people with disabilities while also making sure their voices are not being misrepresented.
This documentary is striking and has a lot of moving parts, which can make it difficult to fully process and understand everything at once. So, what are the takeaways? The key takeaways complement the main ideas, like consent, disability, communication, and power, that help us better understand the story and its overall message. To start, the documentary highlights the complicated relationship between consent, disability, and power. These concepts are already difficult on their own, but when combined, they create situations where it becomes unclear who has control, who has a voice, and whether true consent is even possible. The documentary forces us to consider how power imbalances, especially between a caregiver or authority figure and a vulnerable individual, can influence decisions and relationships in ways that may not be immediately obvious. It also brings attention to the dangers of speaking for someone who cannot easily communicate for themselves. This is one of the most critical issues in the documentary. When communication is facilitated or interpreted by another person, it raises serious concerns about authenticity. Are we truly hearing the individual's thoughts and feelings, or are those messages being shaped, consciously or unconsciously, by someone else? This creates a situation where the person's autonomy and voice can be compromised, even if the intention is to help. Another key takeaway is the idea that good intentions are not smart enough to prevent harm. The documentary challenges the assumption that caring motives automatically lead to ethical actions. It asks us to think about whether someone can genuinely believe they're helping or loving another person while still crossing boundaries that result in harm. This is especially important in fields like education, caregiving, and healthcare, where trust and responsibility are essential. The film also encourages viewers to think more critically about how society views and protects people with disabilities. It challenges us to examine whether we are doing enough to ensure that individuals are both supported and respected as independent people. At the same time, it raises the question of how we balance protection with autonomy, making sure someone is safe without taking away their voice or rights. Finally, the documentary reinforces the importance of ethical responsibility in all situations involving vulnerable individuals. This includes respecting independence, verifying that communication methods are valid and reliable, and being aware of how power dynamics can influence outcomes. It reminds us that ethical decision-making isn't just about intention, it's about accountability, boundaries, and making sure the person at the center is truly being heard.
To help share their message and influence viewers, the social psychology strategies being used are attitudes and persuasion, person perception, social influence and group processes, stereotyping, prejudice and discrimination, and cognitive dissonance. Let's start with attitudes and persuasion. An attitude isn't just a mood, it's the ABC model. Your A, affective feelings, B, your behavioral actions, and C, your cognitive beliefs. We generally assume that our attitudes cause behavior. Persuasion is the process of using reasoning or emotional arguments to change those attitudes. In this story, facilitated communication was sold through the peripheral route to persuasion. Anna didn't use science, she used emotion. She hooked the family's affect, their hope, which led to the behavior of being supportive of the facilitated communication, which eventually led to the cognitive belief that Derek truly was speaking. Once these worked together, the dream that Derek could finally speak for himself became their reality. Next is person perception, and more specifically, the halo effect. Person perception is how we form impressions of others and how we interpret their actions and behaviors. A part of person perception is the halo effect, where we take one specific trait, like someone being a very experienced professor, and let it take over our entire social perception of who they are. For example, this is exactly how people saw Anna Stubblefield versus Derek Johnson. Anna had the halo of being a high-status university professor, so everyone assumed that she was naturally ethical and trustworthy. Derek, on the other hand, was only perceived through his disability. People saw his physical and mental limitations and assumed that he had no internal agency until Anna provided it. This bias in perception is what gave her the power to override the family's initial boundaries. Now, let's talk about stereotyping and benevolent prejudice. Stereotypes are basically mental shortcuts, beliefs that associate a whole group with specific traits. Benevolent prejudice is a positive form of prejudice that is wrapped in superficial kindness, but it is used mainly to maintain a group's oppression. For example, Anna used stereotypes about disability to her advantage. The idea that nonverbal people are trapped. But the real danger was her benevolent prejudice. She didn't act with hate, she acted as Derek's savior. By deciding she was the only one who could give Derek a voice or romance, she was treating him as her dependent. She replaced his real human rights with what she decided was best for him. Her control was disguised as being helpful. We now look at groupthink and informational influence. Groupthink is a phenomenon where people tend to conform to group decisions to avoid feeling outcast, which often leads to a shared and sometimes skewed reality. Informational influence is another phenomenon where individuals conform to the actions or beliefs of others because they believe they have more accurate information. For example, in the documentary, Derek's family was in a confusing spot, and they did not know how to reach him. They looked to Anna as the expert because she had a PhD for the right answers. Once the family and Anna became tightly knit, groupthink took over. Even if someone had a doubt about Anna or facilitated communication, they stayed quiet because they didn't want to be the one to kill the miracle for everyone else. They protected their shared reality at all costs, even ignoring all of their red flags. Finally, we have cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort someone experiences when holding two or more contradicting beliefs, values, or attitudes at the same time. An example of this in the documentary is the conflict of Anna seems like she truly believes she loves him, versus Anna is a convicted predator who faked Derek's voice and used her power in the worst way. When the science proved that Derek wasn't actually typing, Anna could not face that truth because the dissonance was too powerful. She chose dissonance reduction, where she convinced herself the scientists were biased or out to get her. Admitting the truth meant admitting that her life's work was a lie and essentially a crime. So her brain chose to live in the lie to protect her own identity. These 5 social psychology strategies were used to give the audience a feeling of discomfort and a feeling of dissonance themselves.
Many professionals accepted facilitated communication without proper verification, which allowed major decisions like relationships and consent to be based on it. This raises concerns about standards in education, therapy, and healthcare, as well as showing the need for stricter validation to prevent misrepresentation of vulnerable individuals. Authority figures like Anna were not questioned. This demonstrates how authority can discourage critical thinking, emphasizing the need for accountability and oversight, even for trusted professionals. We also see conflicting reactions from family, professionals, and the public. Some saw empowerment and love, while others saw harm. This shows how social environment can be interpreted differently across groups, leading to debate and division. The documentary also highlights the role of media and narrative framing. Emotional storytelling can shape public perception, sometimes overriding logic. Issues of consent and social pressure are also important. Consent claims were based on communication that may not have been independently verified, raising ethical questions. Social pressure to accept narratives can lead people to overlook potential harm. Overall, the film encourages society to balance empathy with suspicion and critical thinking.
Thank you.